This video is going to show some of the commands we can use for contouring the grid files that we've made. So we're going to be focusing on the contour from grid file command. It'll contour one grid at a time. We're going to use the Isopach Maps Autorun to contour multiple grids at one time. And then we're going to use the surface inspector just as an easy way to inspect specific points on the grid. Now before I jump into that, we've got a little bit of a special case in this data set because I do have some strata that outcrop. You won't run into that in all data sets, but it's not going to make a whole lot of sense to try to contour thicknesses or attributes where the seam has already outcropped. So I'm going to use a command on our Strata Calc pull-down menu to draw where those outcrops exist. Because I've already got our geologic model made, this becomes much easier to work with and I can draw all the outcrops at once. I'm going to draw these lines on a layer called outcrop, and I'm going to add the strata name as a layer suffix. So we'll see outcrop C1, outcrop C2, things like that. I'm going to draw the outcrop where the bottom of the strata exists, and we're going to say OK. Pick my geologic model, and I'll pick the strata layers that I want to use. I'm going to use everything except for the C2 parting. So I don't really care about the elevation of the parting, I just want to see the bottom of the C2 bed there. And we'll see it's going to draw in those layers for me, those outcrop lines. And to make those a little easier to understand what I'm looking at, I'm going to look at the layers, and I'll change some colors. We'll set our coal outcrops to be black, our inner burden outcrop to be orange, and our overburden outcrop to be red. There we go. So we've got some limit lines where it's not going to make sense to try to contour the C2 BTU outside of that polyline. So as we're contouring, we can just use those as some realistic bounds. So let's go ahead and we're going to create a few contour maps. Let's make the first one. I want to see where the C1 thickness exists. So something that can help out here, I'm going to isolate to my layers. And I don't want to see anything outside of this boundary. So I'm just going to isolate to that layer. And this is my outcrop C1 layer. So there's no need to contour outside of that. To create a contour, I'm going to go to Grids Pull Down, Contour from Grid File. I'll pick the inclusion perimeter, which is going to be this boundary here. No exclusion perimeter. And now I'm going to pick the C1 thick layer. So I'll open that up. And on this dialog, we can see the range of values that exist. So this coal thickness only ranges from about 4.2 to 5. So I can pick a contour interval appropriate for that. As far as the layer name goes, I like to put these on organized layers called contour dash C1 thick. There are some layer settings here that can automatically name the contour layers. So I could default the contour layer to a grid name. I could set default layers for the labels, really anything I want to like that. So but I'm just going to type that one in manually now. That's good. For the contour interval, I'm going to set this to a value appropriate for something between 4.2 to 5. So I'm going to do a 0.1. I'm going to make sure contour by interval is turned on. If I uncheck this, it's only going to contour a single value. So if I wanted to see where the coal was exactly 4.5 foot thick, that's what I could use that option for. But I want to see these on a regular interval of 0.1. I do have the option to specify the starting and ending values. So basically the minimum, maximum values to contour. I don't want to do that right now. I just want to contour everything. For the color, I really like using this by layer option. I'm not going to draw index contours right now. I'm not going to label the contours just yet. I'm also not going to smooth them. I'll run this command again and show those options. I do like to use this reduce vertices option. What this essentially does is if you have a relatively straight segment on the contour, this option prevents the program from drawing unnecessary vertices on the contour lines. You're not going to notice a huge difference if you keep this offset distance small. Essentially, this means that I could move the contour by up to 1/10 of a foot to reduce the number of vertices. That's going to be fine. Another option that I do like to use is the minimum contour line length. I don't think we're going to run into that in this data set, but if you had any tiny island contours with a very, very short length overall, this just says don't draw any contours with a total length less than 100 feet. I'm not going to do the contour zone analysis just yet. I can do that a little bit later on. And I'm going to click OK. That just draws our contours in there. And if I pick on those contour lines, I can check the properties. I see that's contour at value 4.6. That is at 4.7, right on down the line. So I can see just where the coal thickness changes. So let's do another one similar to that. But this time I want to draw the C1 BTU values. So I'm going to go to my grids pull down, contour from grid file again, pick my same inclusion perimeter, no exclusion. This time I'll pick my C1 BTU value. And notice I've got a much different grid range here, so anywhere from 11,000 to about 13,000. I'm going to change the layer name, contour C1 BTU. I'll pick a contour interval that's going to be appropriate, so I'll do maybe, say, let's do every 100. This time I am going to draw my index contours, and I am going to label the contours. Notice I have different setup options for both of those. So let's tell it for the index contours, we'll look at the setup there. I can specify a different layer from the normal contours. So what I'll do is I'll call this contour-C1 BTU index. I could specify a different color. I'm just going to do that by layer. The index interval, I'm going to do every 500 feet, so 5x, whatever value we have here. And I'll keep a normal 0 line width. So every 5th contour is going to show up on a different layer. As for the labels on the contours, I'll look at the setup there. Again, I can specify a unique layer for it if I want to, but I'm just going to put this on the exact same layer as the contours themselves. So contour-C1 BTU. For the text size, I'm going to try a text size of 10 for now. We can always change that later if we want to. A lot of options on here. I won't go through all of these. But the two options that I really like to use are align text with contour and hide the drawing under the labels. This first option, rather than putting horizontal pieces of text, it's actually going to align the text along the contour itself. Still looks a little more appealing. And hide drawing under the labels, that's just going to prevent the contour line from being drawn on top of the label itself. It doesn't break the contour, it remains one continuous line, but it puts a wipeout entity behind the text so that the label is very easy to see. As far as the internal label intervals, we can specify up to 4 labels on each contour, or we could do it with a distance method where we could say every 500 feet we want to put a contour, or want to put a label on the contour. I'll stick with 2 for now. Click OK. All the same settings there. The next time I do this, I'll turn on my hatch zones, but for now we're going to say no contour zone analysis. And we'll click OK. So that's a little more information for me. I can clearly see the labels. Now if I want to change the index interval color, I'll just change that layer to be a red. And that's just a little easier to see where the major changes are in that BTU value. So I'm going to do that one once more. I'm actually just going to erase these contours and those labels. I'm going to draw the same contours again, but now I'm going to put a color fill on them. So if I want to erase those layers, I could just hit Control Z to undo, or I could use Edit pull down, erase by layer. Notice that this command is also on the Carlson Layers toolbar. So here I can just select the layers from the screen that I want to erase. So I can click that. I'll get a sample of the index contour, sample of the standard contour. Press enter, and it picks up those two layer names, types them in here. Then I can click OK, and it erases everything on those layers. The layers still exist, but it's just erased them out of the drawing. So I'm going to do that command again. Contour from grid file, pick the inclusion perimeter, no exclusion. Now I'm going to pick C1 BTU, and I can, because of my layer settings, my contour layer names are getting overwritten every time because I've got a default contour layer to grid name. I can mess around with those some if I want, but just for now, I'll type it back in. Double check my index contours. Check the label names. And the only thing I'm going to change here is I'm going to turn on this hatch zones option. Click OK. And so it goes ahead and draws those layers. It draws the contours in for me. But now I get an option to add a color fill to the hatch zones. So it's even more, it's a little easier to see where I have the high values and the low values. So this table, it's remembered the values that I used the last time I used this command. So I'm just going to start off by clearing all that information out, and I'm going to click Auto. So I get this dialog. I'm going to say I want to start off with zone number 1. I'm going to set the values, and I'm going to increment through them. So the lowest contour I'm going to have in here is going to be 11,100. So I'm going to start off at 1,100. And I want to increment on the same increment as the contours. You don't necessarily have to do that, but I prefer to. So I'm going to say every 100 units, we're going to switch to a new color. I'm going to set all the color fill in to be a solid fill. I'll use a scale of 1, that's fine. And I can put this on a specific layer, which I'm going to call contour-C1 BTU hatch. For setting the colors themselves, we actually have two options for doing this. You can start with setting a starting color and then setting a color increment value. Now, the way this is thought of, the CAD color book has a number assigned to every color. So this color here, this is index color 1. When I hover over the color there, you can see that number. Color 2, 3, right on down the line. And color 10 starts here. If you move across the columns, the colors increment by a value of 10. If you move up in the column, or up in a row, the values increment by 2. This is split into two sections where the even numbers are on top, the odd numbers are on the bottom. The odd numbers are kind of a lighter shade, or pastel colors. So a really simple color increment is to start on this first pastel color, increment by 10, and it just picks a color up across the rows. That's the one that I really like to use. But another way that you can set the colors is by setting your low, medium, high colors, and the program will try to find intermediate colors from there. So I could set my low to be a dark blue. I could set my medium to be this shade of green. I could set my high value to be red. So that's another way to automatically set these colors. But I'm just going to start with a starting color of 11 and then increment by 10. When I click OK, you can see the preview of the colors there. So if you don't like the colors that were selected, you could just repeat it. It remembers all your settings, and you could make a change. So I could color increment by 2, for example. You can see it gives me a very different palette. So that's just some of the ways that you can set those colors. I'm happy with this. If I want to, I can save these settings. I'll go ahead and do that now just in case we need them later on. And I'll call this my Hatch Zones C1 BTU. I'll click OK. And the program is going to color fill those zones. So it's just easier to kind of take a step back from the map and very easily see where you have the high and low values. The command also gives me the option to draw a legend. So I'll put this right here. For the legend size, I'll try a 100 and I can scale that up or down if I need to. That's a little large, so I'm actually going to rescale that. Quick way to do it, I can go to Edit Pull Down, Scale. I'll do a standard scale. Pick all that information. Pick a base point somewhere down here so everything will shrink towards this point. And the scale factor, I'll do that 0.25, so 4 times smaller. There we go. So you do sometimes get colors that kind of break out of the palette, so we might need to go back and readjust those colors just so it's a more smooth transition from low to highs. But this just shows another option for you when coloring those values in. So the next thing I'm going to do is show how we can do multiple contour maps at once. For example, if I wanted to see both the thickness and the BTU for the C2 coal seam, we can actually do that with one command. I'm going to turn these layers off. And let's show the outcrop for my C2 layer. And we'll make that current and we'll turn off the C1 outcrop. So now I want to do those multiple contours for a different strata layer. So the way I can do those all at once is by going to the Isopach Maps. There's a lot of commands in here, some just for editing contours. There's 3 in particular here that will actually make contours. If I use this Strata Isopach Maps command, that works very similar to the contour from grid file. It's just going to contour one layer at a time. One of the primary differences there is when you use this command, you actually don't have to have an existing grid. You can contour straight off the drill holes. But the one that I want to use is this Define Isopach Maps Autorun command. Start that up. Get a few prompts. First of all, it's going to ask me to select the drill holes, but I don't have to use them because I'm going to be contouring directly off of grid files. So I'll press enter for none. Now when I do that, I get a prompt asking if I want to, instead of picking drill holes, if I want to select an existing StrataCalc file. I'm going to say no to that because I've already got my grids made. I'm not trying to contour things on the fly from drill holes or a StrataCalc file. So we'll say no. Select the inclusion perimeter. That's going to be this boundary for the C2 strata, or C2 bed rather. And I don't have an exclusion. So here I can add as many strata as I want and specify the layers. We do have the option to import a strata grid Autorun. So if I wanted to contour every grid file that I made, I could load it in here, but for the moment I'm not going to do that. I'm going to want to add these one at a time, and that's going to force me to pay attention to my settings a little more closely. So I'll click Add, and what I'm actually going to do down here at the bottom is I want to say that I'm going to be coming off of an existing grid file. When I do that, I can actually choose the grid file, and here I'm going to pick my C2 key thickness grid. Take a look at all the other settings I can work with here. So I'm going to put this on a layer called contour-C2 thick, and I want to contour that with a, let's do a 0.5 interval. I'm not going to worry about smoothing the contours. So you can see I've got a lot of the exact same settings that I had when contouring from a single grid file, but it's all just shown to me on one dialog, a little bit different format here. Let's see, for this one, I will turn on the labels. Okay, so contour-C2 thick. The same settings there. Not going to worry about those index contours. And just any other changes that I want to make there. But I'll say OK to that one. And then I'm going to add one more. This one is going to be the C2 BTU grid. So for this one, I'll call this C2 BTU. I'll contour that on a 100 unit interval. Double check the label layer. And that's good to go. So I could add as many of these as I wanted to, but for now I'm just going to save these settings. And this is my C2 contours. Save that. And then I can actually make the Isopach maps. So it draws one, mix it out, and both of them are actually drawn in there, but we're looking at two layers at once right now. So I'll look at my layers. You can check out just the thickness layers, so we can see not a whole lot of change there. I could have used a smaller interval to see some more contours. As for the BTUs, got a lot of variability there. So that Isopach Map Autorun command can just be used to contour multiple grids all at once. So if we needed to update our geologic model, maybe we got another drill hole, we could rerun the strata grids Autorun to remake the grids. Then we could rerun this Isopach Map Autorun to recreate the contour maps. So it's just an easy way to automate the process. So another useful tool for inspecting surfaces and just kind of seeing how things exist between the contours is our surface inspector. This is found under the grids pull-down menu, surface inspector, and this is also found on the Carlson surfaces toolbar. If we have anything in here, we can just clear that out. And this allows me to load in as many grids as I want, and as I move my cursor around the screen, I'll see what those grid values are at that location. Now a nice option here is we can actually load in a complete geologic model and see how those grids change around the area. So I'm going to pick my geologic model, and I could pick all the grids if I wanted to. And there's some options up at the top here for actually adding a spot label. I'm going to stick with these default options here, but you'll see how those get loaded in. So I'm going to click OK. And I get this window pops up. That's just going to show me how these values change wherever my cursor is. So if I put my cursor here and I click, gives me a little label readout. Let's do one right here, a little bit easier to see. So you can see at that spot where the surface elevation is, where the overburden elevation is, and just gives me a nice little readout. So it's just a really good tool for seeing how values change between contours, or if you want to see how some values are right next to a drill hole, maybe if you didn't have contours on, just a good tool in general.